Welcome to the Steelers by the Lake podcast. My name is James Strong, joined once again by my co-host Cody Tanner, all the way from West Virginia. Cody, how are you this fine Monday evening?
James, I'm doing all right. It's a good thing we're recording today because tomorrow I might be in Kentucky for work. So who knows where the good Lord's going to take me this week. On my Lanta, I'm just going everywhere. I'm going all over the place. James, how are you doing? How's the shoulder?
A lot better, man. A lot better. The pain levels are drastically reduced. So very grateful for that, getting a little better range of motion, and very appreciative for all the help I have received from both my father and my wonderful girlfriend, Erica. She's just been absolutely clutch helping me like crazy around here. So,
Okay. Thank you, Erica, for taking care of my honey bunny boo-boo bear. Anyways, we're going to talk about a couple of things here. There's news to talk about just from a standpoint of how the team sits after the first 2 weeks of preseason that we will get into here shortly. But we do have to talk about the second preseason game. Before we get into that real quick, Braden Fehoko did get placed on IR. So that is one player on the injured reserve. I don't know if at this point I've seen us sign anybody in correlation to that yet. So that
I think they did. I think there was a back of the roster nose tackle that came on, but it's not really worth.
Yeah,
there was a different body out there in the middle of the defense at the end of the game.
Yep, fair enough. So let's go ahead and talk about this game.
Whoa.
What?
This is not game notes. This
not
is
game notes. We have a lot more pregame notes. My apologies.
So as Cody was saying, let's talk about the last bit of practice before the game. What's his name? Mr. Jackson there. Drake is Dante Jackson. Dante. I keep on messing that up, man.
I don't know how. We traded one DJ for another DJ. Deontay Johnson.
But it's the Deontay versus Dante, and then I want to call it something else. Anyway, Dante Jackson, the new starting corner, missed some time this week with a nagging injury. It was nothing significant, but the significant thing is that Corey Trice got first team cornerback reps opposite of Joey Porter Jr.
There you go.
In practice multiple days in a row. So that's huge for him. That shows that the kind of slow progression and how they're ramping up his activity really is just because they're trying to make sure they don't push him back too fast and cause a re-aggravation to an injury. So real nice to see that. Kind of in correlation, that cornerback, Kalen Barnes, was also waived injured. So he's on going to the injured reserve list as well.
Yep.
He was one of the corners that was out in front of Corey Trice on the list there on the depth chart. So creates an opportunity for one man when another man goes down.
Yep. All right. Now, James.
Still not. No.
No.
These are all still pregame notes.
I can't tell what day it says.
None of this.
Oh, I do see the Dean Lowry. So Dean Lowry, I forgot about Dean Lowry and Cordell Patterson did also have full participation in practice, which is good. We've been looking forward to seeing Cordell Patterson get some playing time, and you'll realize why we're even looking forward to that a little bit more once we get to the actual game notes. But Dean Lowry is also nice to see. He's the rookie drafted out of, was he Wisconsin? No.
Which one were we talking about now?
Dean Lowry.
No, Dean Lowry is the veteran from Minnesota.
Oh, I'm thinking of the other guy.
The veteran defensive lineman. Yep. You're thinking Logan Lee, probably.
Logan Lee, you're right.
Yeah.
So, but no, exciting to see both those guys out there. And hopefully we get to see Cordell Patterson a little bit more in that final preseason game. Also, running back Jonathan Ward, dealing with hamstring in the final practice. He did walk off on his own. But those hamstrings have been an issue from the get-go. It seems like this. I don't know if we're not doing enough warm-ups or if we're not taking, I don't know what. The hamstrings on this team are not there this year.
I think it's just the nature of the beast. Anytime you're playing a sport like that, it's going to happen, especially in the heat of the summer. It's tougher to stay properly hydrated. And you can drink as much water as you want, but you're sweating it all back out. So
very true.
I think that'll kind of chill out as the season goes along, but definitely seeing some hamstrings early. We did see some first team reps for Zach Frazier while Nate Herbig was still healthy, but unfortunately, before that joint practice with the Buffalo Bills, Nate Herbig injured his shoulder. We have since learned that unfortunately, this is a rotator cuff tear. If you've heard of that before, it's because that's what I've been dealing with this recent surgery. So I feel very bad for Mr. Herbig. That's a painful injury and a very painful recovery process, as I am going through it as well right now.
Yep.
Just I would not expect him to be able to make it back until late in the season, if this season at all.
Yeah.
Now this depends on the severity of the tear. Right? If we've got a partial tear, there's a chance maybe you see him back in 3 or 4 months. If you've got a complete tear, he's done for the year. He's not going to make it back.
Yeah.
Hope
just
for the
depends.
best for Mr. Herbig, and hopefully he can get back maybe late in the season. And if not, hopefully he has a full recovery and can continue playing football.
Yeah, no, 100%. Especially, we've got to see his brother have some good success late in the year last year and this preseason so far. Hopefully he can come back and make a late comeback in the year. He does add a lot of good depth to the interior offensive line. We had some struggles week 1 in those snaps with Justin Fields. We talked about that last week, but still hoping he does make a full recovery and can still play football. Beanie Bishop did not play in this game. He should play in the preseason game number 3, the last one of the preseason. So really hoping to see him go out there and get some playing time. Let's go ahead and now, James, because it's official.
Now we can talk about the game.
What's up, brother? So Pittsburgh did host the Buffalo Bills. Unfortunately, it was not a good game for us. We'll get into the reasons why, but I think the fact is, James, I'm just tired of coming into these. I felt like the past 2 years, it's just been we've had bad games. We're just having these podcasts talking about bad games. And it's unfortunate that I don't know where, like, everyone's going to say clearly coming from the offensive line. Yes, Broderick Jones especially had a very, very bad day. But outside of that, I don't know that I saw enough, even on plays that he did block or wasn't a complete security risk, that I felt confident in our ability to play football with him blocking. So, and move the ball downfield and put points on the board, this, that, and the other. But let's break it down. We always start with the quarterback room first. Russell Wilson getting his first action of this preseason so far. And James, not impressed.
No, man, I would say that if you're going to say that Broderick Jones was the worst offensive player of that first team unit, probably the second worst was Russ, unfortunately. Russ just didn't look sharp. He didn't look comfortable in the pocket. Darn near everything was a check down to a running back or a tight end. Or just passes at or behind the line of scrimmage or only a couple of yards past it. I want to say by the time he was done the furthest downfield he went successfully was about 4 yards. Now I know that he ended up with a lot more yardage because of yards after catch, but the actual yards past the line of scrimmage to where he threw the ball was infuriating because we saw week 1 Justin Fields pushing the ball down the field, right?
Yep.
We saw him really pushing it down, using lots of different receivers, mostly wide receivers, not so much with the tight ends, but at least the ball was getting pushed down the field. And then we saw Russ kind of revert to what we were really, really frustrated with last year with that Matt Canada style offense.
Yep.
And again, to be fair, a lot of what we were frustrated with last year was not necessarily the offense. It was the decision making to always dump it off to whoever was the shortest, easiest throw rather than pushing it down the field. So 8 of 10 looks great, but 47 yards on eight complete passes are awful. Like, you got to push the ball down the field. If you're not even getting 5 yards per completed pass, it just tells the whole story right there on everything being a drop off. And we didn't see the ball get pushed down the field until a timeout was called during a drive, and Mike Tomlin went and talked to Russ and the offensive coordinator and kind of said, hey, let's start pushing it down the field. And then we saw some stuff finally get pushed down the field, but kind of too little too late, and just not a good enough job by the offensive line to give Russ time either. So real nasty combination between poor pocket protection by the offensive line, the first team unit anyway, and Russ not looking comfortable and not looking willing to throw it down the field. But as far as your starting unit, Zach Frazier did get the start with that Nate Herbig injury. Isaac Siamalu did start at left guard. The first week was just a rest for him. Otherwise, your traditional Dan Moore on the left, James Daniels on the right, and Broderick Jones on the right tackle. So that was your starting five, which stayed that way for a few series before they started rotating some of the backup guards in. We saw some Spencer Anderson and Mason McCormick come into the game pretty quickly. So those guys I thought were a lot better.
But definitely better.
But Russell.
And you can blame it on play calling. You can blame it on execution. I think it's still a combination of both. I think it's probably more execution from the offensive side of the ball, whether you consider the blocking or Russell Wilson's inability to have any kind of pocket presence or be able to get the ball away. 8 of 10 looks phenomenal on paper, but when you realize that was on 5 or 6 drives,
Five total drives.
So 5 drives, and he averaged 5.6 plays per drive. That was the average number of offensive plays we got per drive was 5.6 with Russell in. Late in the second quarter and the second half, the combined drives for Justin Fields, he averaged 9.2 plays per drive, which means he's getting first downs. He's moving the ball down the field. We're getting yards. Now, granted, one of those drives ended in a turnover. Actually, 2 of those drives, 3 of those drives ended in turnovers on downs, and one ended with a field goal. Russell Wilson had one end in a field goal and one a missed field goal. Only missed field goal. Was all Russell had to show for it, unfortunately.
And that was a 52-yarder. So it's not like they got real close. So you can't even, Boswell makes that most of the time.
Yeah, and he hit the uprights.
You can't be real upset. Yeah, you can't be real upset. It wasn't a horrible miss, but
no.
Definitely a rough start for the kickers early on here.
A drastically rough start. And I think I'm trying not to go on a tangent right now because I'm just frustrated. I think it's a rough start for the whole team still, if I'm being honest, outside of a few defensive players that are having really, really good showings. And we'll get to it later, but like Herbig's having a good showing. I think Killebrew had a good showing this last game with the interception. We'll talk about that here momentarily. But James, and this is something I almost brought up in the pregame show, before we started recording. I'm frustrated because this defense is a win now defense. This defense is a Super Bowl contending defense, and the offense has nothing to give them to help. And the talent is on paper like crazy.
And the crazy part is that the first team defense in these first 2 games has looked very good, and they've been minus most of the top tier talent both games.
Yep. No
right?
Cam
TJ
either.
Watt didn't play either game. Cam didn't play either game.
We had Minka.
Alex Highsmith didn't play either game. Minka played this game, but not for very long.
Nope.
Didn't play in the first one at all. I don't think Dante Jackson played in this one. If he did, it was only for a series or 2. And Patrick Queen played for a series or 2, and then he came out, didn't play in the first game. So you still haven't seen the entire first team defense. And with the guys that are filling in their stead, it still looks pretty dang good, man.
Yep.
So that's reason to be encouraged on how good this defense possibly can be, but a little scary on the offensive side. So I'm with you on the whole Justin Fields thing, and then we can move on from the quarterbacks. At least we saw some competence with Justin. Still not where you're looking for. Still not pushing the ball enough down the field, although Justin definitely has shown way more tendency to do so than what we saw out of that 5-drive sample from Russ Wilson, right?
And Justin could have won the game. Justin had a chance to throw in a touchdown in the end zone. The player got a lot of nice separation, just overthrew him. But I'd rather see that than not see those downfield attempts at all in this preseason. Which is really frustrating.
It seems like Justin at least gives you the opportunity to get some touchdowns and field goals by moving the ball.
Yep.
This third preseason game is going to be extremely important, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's another heavy dose of Russ and another heavy dose of Justin Fields, because they might have a difficult decision to make. If Russ looks just as bad in this last preseason game as he did in this one, I don't know how you can start him in that first regular season game.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's going to be very interesting because obviously he came expecting to be the starter, but if he's going to go out and put on those performances and not be able to get rid of the ball, even if your offensive line isn't blocking very well, you're supposed to be a mobile quarterback. I realize he's getting older, but Justin Fields gives you a lot more out of the mobility and the scrambling and the extending the plays than what Russell gives you. And Russell was supposed to come in and give that to us. And I haven't seen any ability to understand where the pressure's coming from, pocket pressure, sensing, whatever, and then the desire to get the ball downfield. I've seen so many dump offs from him instead of taking a chance that I really hope he realizes that he could lose this starting job by not taking chances. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. Yeah, let's go ahead and move off. Running backs. Running back room. Justin Fields, to go back to quarterback, did lead the team in rushing with 8 carries for 42 yards. That just, I guess, has to be said. Jaylen Warren only had 1 carry in this game. He did go down with an injury. It is a hamstring injury. It does appear to be bad. More than likely out 2 weeks to a month. I think there's a chance for it being more. Lamichael Pirine looked good. 6 carries for 20 yards. Not a great average, but he ran hard, which was exciting to see. Najee, 4 for 17, looked okay. I didn't see a whole lot from any of these guys that are the bottom tier guys that I saw last week. I saw a lot of hard running from Edwards last week. I didn't feel like I saw that on the 2 carries. It was only 2 carries, don't get me wrong.
But tough sample size. I think he didn't get into a little later too.
I think that was like one of the last few drives. Aaron Shamp.
So I would say, Shamp, where you were about to go.
Yep.
Yeah, Aaron Shamp.
Talk about him.
That's the guy this week that showed us that he can run hard, has a good center of gravity, good contact balance after contact, which is extremely important as a running back. I feel like Pittsburgh has put themselves in a situation where there's a group of like 3 or 4 borderline, will they make the 53? Will they be on the practice squad running backs that you might be able to try to hang on to on the practice squad that will be worthy of a 53-man roster position next year. So I'm really excited to see how this 4th preseason game plays out, and I really hope they can get more successful drives to get these guys more running attempts, which is up to the quarterbacks to keep that going. The running backs are kind of doing their job, right? Champlin with 3.8 yards a carry, Edwards 3, Pirine 3.3. These guys aren't doing a horrible job, and there's not a single one of these guys that looks like they're too small, too skinny, too slow to do the job.
Yeah, I mean, even Quez Watkins, the wide receiver, had an end around go for 6 yards, which I hated seeing, but whatever. It just gave me PTSD thinking back to all the jet sweeps that did not work in the past. Also, Cordarrelle Patterson had 1 carry for -1 yards. He got hit before he even could get to the line of scrimmage. The one thing I will say, James, is the reason I'm excited for this running back group, I think obviously Najee and Jaylen are a lock. You're probably only keeping 3 running backs. I think you could
a lock too.
That's true. If he stays healthy,
they don't oftentimes do 4 running backs.
Well,
you might be in a situation where you have to keep the extra running back and just not have a fullback on the roster.
Yeah, and here's where I'm sitting with this. I'm comfortable with any single one of these people being the 3rd or 4th guy, because I think the bigger issue we're having right now is a combination of both play calling, in the sense of I don't like when certain play calls are being, or running calls are being called, and then 2, you fix the offensive line blocking. These guys show they can run hard. If they hit a hole and can get to that second level before they get contact, any one of these guys is putting up a 80-yard rushing game if they get enough touches. So without losing the average.
And I think this is a decent time to tie in some of the offensive line I felt had some good performances.
Yeah.
Because when we start talking about that second team unit again, that's where the success of the offense came again, was when that second team offensive line came in. And the first adjustment that was made is that Isaac Seumalo and James Daniels came out. Zach Frazier stayed in. Starting tackles stayed in. We saw the addition of Mason McCormick. And on the right side, the late round draft pick from last year, the other guard, Spencer Anderson. When those 2 came in, then we started seeing the ball move a little bit better. I thought both of them had pretty good games, and I thought Mason McCormick had a really nice bounce back game from what was kind of an up and down first preseason game. I thought he was very good in this game. So I'm pretty optimistic about the future with those 2 guys as possible starting guards as early as next year and the year beyond.
Yep.
So I really liked what I saw out of those 2. And I think that's a pretty optimistic thing. And also with now Nate Herbig being gone for what should be a substantial amount of time, we'll find out soon. I imagine they'll just put him on the IR, and if they do that, we're not going to get an estimate of when they think he'll be back. Hopefully, we'll find out if there's a designation to return this season or not.
Yep.
If they do that, then you would assume that they think there's a chance of him being able to make it back. Don't forget, both Spencer Anderson and Mason McCormick have some experience snapping the ball, because otherwise you're looking at Ryan McCollum as the only backup center on the roster, and I don't think they want to use him as a 53-man spot. So this goes back to some of the things that we covered during the pre-draft process when we found out that Pittsburgh sent an offensive line coach out to Mason McCormick before the draft, like the day before, to watch him snap some footballs to see if he could do it in a pinch. And that was the emergency plan in case they missed out on the top 3 centers in the draft, was to use Mason McCormick as the possible future center instead, even though he didn't have a lot of experience doing it.
Yep.
So it is something that they were comfortable with. They drafted him. Spencer Anderson has some experience as well, not a ton. I'm hoping to see both of them get some snaps at center in this third preseason game so I can feel a little bit better about who will be the backup in case Zach Frazier were to get nicked up.
And if those guys do not look good, do not be surprised if Pittsburgh brings in Mason Cole.
I will refute that immediately.
I don't want it.
No, and I'll tell you why. Because a picture of him was released recently. Pounds. So he's done with his football career. He lost all the weight.
Yeah, he's in. Bueno.
Yeah, he's in that retirement mode already. He's done. So that will not be the emergency fallback plan. But maybe a reunion with J.C. Hassenauer might happen. I understand he just was added to a roster like a week ago around the NFL, so I would expect him to be a cut down guy at the end. He's at least a capable center. So
true.
Maybe he might be a possibility.
Looking at this receiver group, James, the most catches by one player was 3 in this game, and it was Scotty Miller. Scotty Miller is proving himself to be available to the quarterback. I don't want to keep Scott Miller, but I'm impressed with how he's performing. I'm not going to lie to you. The ball gets thrown to his way, he catches it. Sure, they're dump offs, but he makes moves afterwards. He catches the ball. He doesn't run backwards. We get positive yardage. I'll take that out of a wide receiver any day. So he led the team in catches, him and Van Jefferson. 3 for 19 for Jefferson, 3 for 18 for Scotty Miller. And then Des Fitzpatrick had 2 catches for 32 yards. Connor Hayward had 2 catches for 20 yards. Correct me if I'm wrong. Who had the missed touchdown pass? Who was that?
It was a back of the roster guy, not even somebody who registered a catch.
Okay.
Probably
Matt Sokol, my guess is. I don't know. We'll look it up later. I'm not worried about it too much.
Yeah.
I was just curious to see who had missed that catch. Not that it was their fault. Jalen Ward had 2 catches out of the backfield for 14 yards before he went down with an injury. Pat Freiermuth again had 1 catch for 10 yards, if I'm not mistaken. Again, that was on a 3rd and long or something. Didn't get the first down. Start doing that on first down.
Out of the backfield.
Start doing it on first down.
Pass protecting.
He's getting 10 yards every time. Start doing it on first down.
Well, and the crazy thing is, once again, this was in a situation where it was a pass play where he originally stays in as a pass protector and then leaks out. So it's the same as dumping it off to a running back. It's not even a legitimate pass play as much as it is I don't like anything downfield, so I'm dumping it off to my emergency guy.
Yeah.
I like it a little bit better as an emergency dump off to a tight end than a fullback, just because the tight end's typically better hands and a little better at getting some yards after that first collision, because it's usually a smaller defensive back that's going to hit him.
Yep.
But still not somebody that's going to be slippery enough to make 3 guys miss and go get a first down when you throw it to him 2 yards beyond the line of scrimmage and they need 10.
Yep.
So not a successful strategy on 3rd and long by any means.
No, it's frustrating to continue to see that. And this is where my frustration lies, and we'll get to this in just a second. Michael Pruitt had 1 catch for 8 yards. J. Ray Jenkins, 1 for 5. Deuce Watts, 1 for 5. LaMichael Pirine, 1 for 4. George Pickens, 1 for 4. And then Cordero Patterson had 1 catch for no yards. It was a very lackluster receiving core. But again, when you get the quality of play from the quarterback that we've seen, you're not going to get that. James, I want to talk real quick. Pittsburgh's offensive coordinators. I feel like everyone has had a lot of issues with Todd Haley, Randy Fitchner, and we all had issues with Matt Canada. I'm getting frustrated because we're having consistent issues with these people. The play calling, the designed plays, whatever it is. I don't understand anymore why we're not pushing the ball down the field. Is it a play calling thing? Is it a quarterback comfort thing? Or is and I'm going to say this, and I know right where you're going to go, but is it where the offensive coordinators have their hands tied by what the front office or what Mike Tomlin wants to do?
I think the last couple of years, a lot of it has been that there's no clear, this is the path of how we're going to go no matter how it goes out, right? So the big fear in the quarterback room is to turn the ball over and be the reason that you're losing games. So when you're scared to turn the ball over, what you're not going to do is throw it over the middle of the field, regardless of how many guys are there. You might not even look over the middle of the field. If you do, it's a quick glance, and if somebody isn't like college wide open where nobody's around them, you're not throwing it to them. So I think that's a major factor, at least in the last couple years, is Kenny Pickett being scared to turn the ball over, Mitch Trubisky being scared to turn the ball over. Russ Wilson proved in Denver he was scared to turn the ball over. He didn't turn it over much, but he didn't use the middle of the field.
Yep.
So we're seeing a pattern here post Ben Roethlisberger of being a little bit scared to use the middle of the field, and it's too huge of an area to not use.
Yep.
If you don't use the middle of the field, the defense has such a huge advantage, it's not even funny. And until we get quarterbacks that are comfortable doing that, I think you could put Andy Reid as the offensive coordinator and it'll still look that way.
That's fair. So looking back to this, Todd Haley, everyone had an issue with Todd Haley. Todd Haley's first 2 years in 2012 and 2013, he went just 500. In the years following, he went 11-5, 10-6, 11-5, and 13-3 in his final year as an offensive coordinator. I understand probably why we were complaining, because I remember that the play calling was rough, but we were winning games. Now we're getting to the point where,
and to be fair, with Todd Haley, it was a highly productive offense and one of the best. So I would argue that people that had an issue with Todd Haley were not being realistic because they wanted Pittsburgh to go from the top 3 offense in the league to better than everybody else by a country mile. And that's just not realistic. They were a very good offense with Todd Haley.
Yeah. And then once we made the switch to Randy Fitchner, he went 9-6-1, 8-8, 12-4. Don't get me wrong, the 12-4 looked good. Lost in the wild card. We haven't won a division game since 2016 under Todd Haley as offensive coordinator. And then we switched to Matt Canada for 3 years, and the last year being Eddie Faulkner coming in as well. And Matt Canada went 9-7-1, 9-8, 10-7. My frustration here lies in the fact that I feel like post Ben Roethlisberger, whether you blame it or give responsibility to, whatever you want to call it, the offensive coordinator, the offensive play calling, or Mike Tomlin, we have not seen enough come out of here. And I've been heavy on being okay with scrutinizing Mike Tomlin because it is his team. He is the head coach. He needs to do things and take care of things when they're not being taken care of by the people who are supposed to be taking care of it. And I was happy to see this game that on a 3rd and long or 3rd and short or whatever it was, maybe it was 4th down, I can't remember, we called a timeout. And Mike Tomlin went to the quarterback and went to Arthur Smith and was like, hey, push the ball downfield. Now, I don't know word for word what he said, but it was very clear that he said, we're not doing this little dinks and dunks, because the very next play happened to be a pass downfield. And it was a good play, if I remember correctly. Like, we made it work.
Yeah.
And so I'm really hopeful that moving forward, that are they practicing throwing the ball downfield? Are we just not doing that? And again, James, this goes back to something I talked about last year. Our defense is very good, but our defense gives up a lot of things. And I think it's because our defense builds up too much confidence playing our offense in practice. Because our offense is not good. Our defense is here. They feel like they're here in practice, and then they perform like they're here because, and if you're not on YouTube, you don't understand what I'm saying, but you get it. I'm just frustrated with seeing a lackluster offense and a defense that sometimes underperforms when I feel like it's still the offense's fault. I don't feel like they're being challenged enough in practice. and the offense just is lackluster and there's too much talent on paper, man. The top 2 tight ends, the top 2 wide receivers, the 2 running backs we have, and the young talent we have on the offensive line, it's just too much. It's just too much talent there to struggle the way we've been in the first 2 preseason games.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. It's got to get better. I'm not ready to throw the panic flag up in the air like a lot of folks seem to be already this preseason after 2 games, especially some national media folks who are very, very happy to blame Mike Tomlin any chance they get an opportunity to.
Yep.
But I think we're going to have to be patient on this one because a lot of things just haven't gone the way Pittsburgh was hoping. You were hoping to have Troy Fautanu start in that second game at right tackle. He's already got an injury. We were hoping to see Roman Wilson heavily involved in the first preseason games. He hasn't been able to play yet due to an ankle injury, although the rumor is that he's ramping up and getting closer and closer to coming back. Maybe we might see him in that third preseason game. We're just seeing a lot of things that are not going the way we had hoped. Even Broderick Jones, as we talked about his poor performance the first 2 games so far now, he's clearly dealing with an injury in that right elbow, but he's got a huge heavy-duty brace on it. And he's losing this year, he's losing to power. People are getting into his chest and knocking him back. They're not getting around him. They're not out-athleting him around. They're not getting past his length. They're getting into his chest. He's missing with his hands. His hand placement isn't landing when he's throwing his puncher. He's just throwing it so late that the guy's already beat him. So we're getting back to fundamental issues going on with them. Even when Troy Fautanu in that first game was struggling, it was because he was missing with his punch. So I think a lot of that, as time goes on, practice will clean that sort of thing up. But it's going to be frustrating in the meanwhile, because if you can't protect your quarterback, you can't execute your offense.
Yep.
And nobody looks good when they're not getting protected. I promise you that. So they have got to figure out a way to clean that up. And they got to figure it out now. There's no time to wait. It's got to get figured out now, or it's going to be a rough start to this regular season, and we're going to be talking a lot more negatively about how things have gone if we can't figure out how to move people on defense and protect that quarterback.
Yep. I'm very interested to see how this goes. Enough of the offense. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball.
Yes. Some happy things to talk about.
Yes, some very happy things. So defensive front, I want to start off by talking about Montravius Adams. I think he had one of his best games. I think him and DeMarvin Leal both looked good. We were very excited at one point. There was a screenplay called, and Montravius Adams did a phenomenal job of recognizing it and getting out in front of the screen, forcing the halfback to come back towards the inside, where DeMarvin Leal just ate him up. Phenomenal play from those 2 guys. Love to see that. Montravius Adams, I felt like 2 years ago in the preseason gave us a spin move that me and you were just hyped about, and then we haven't seen much yet. I remember it clear as day. We're like, oh, that spin move. But since then, I'm excited to see his improvement, and I'm actually very excited to probably see him make the 53. That's my guess right now. And again, we will be actually, I shouldn't say again, we will be doing our 53-man roster predictions here very soon. Probably, my guess is next week, potentially, depending.
Yeah, we might have to do it before the game because roster cut down is usually the day after.
Correct.
So we might have to do a show that's just our 53-man roster prediction and then do one a couple days later that recaps that final game.
Yeah. So we'll get to that hopefully this upcoming weekend. But again, those 2 guys I thought looked very, very good. Those were the highlight players of that defensive front for me specifically.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I would say Keanu Benton was awesome.
Yep.
He finally got a chance to play more than a few snaps because he got his eye poked in that first preseason game, so we didn't get him for very long. Very disruptive, just like he has been previously. And I also thought Dean Lowry looked really good. Dean got his first preseason action with us, was very stout, got penetration all night long as a pass rusher, constantly moving those interior offensive linemen back, which if you can get that kind of thing out of your backup defensive lineman, that's how TJ Watt gets past 20 sacks. That's how Alex Highsmith gets more sacks because the guy can't step forward to get away from TJ. you've got to have guys that can collapse the pocket on the interior. And Dean Lowry and Keanu Benton showed that in a major way. And I agree with you. It's really exciting about Montravius and DeMar because I feel like those two are really showing out and having a nice preseason. And it's starting to look like the defensive line is almost in pen already, brother. Like there are 6 guys that almost look like locks right now. And the only question might be, do they keep a 7th or an 8th defensive lineman? And that's tough to justify, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of times they do keep 7, but 8, no, they don't ever keep 8.
With the injuries we're having in other positions, it's very hard to process that right now.
Yeah.
I'd have to see some health improvement and injury improvement or updates from some of these other positions, offensive line included, to see if that would even be something that like we'd be okay with. So we will definitely look into that. James, the linebacker core was easily fronted by, again, another great game from Nick Herbig, 1.5 sacks on the game, 5 total tackles. Mark Robinson had a good game. I feel like these guys are performing very, very well. Patrick Queen got involved and got his first action of the year. Landon Roberts getting some tackles. I really am impressed with the depth at those linebacker positions. Obviously, we talk about Peyton Wilson. He had 2 assisted tackles on the game, but is in, if I'm not mistaken, still in concussion protocol.
He's in protocol, yeah.
So
we don't have confirmation of the whether or not at this point. I don't know if we'll ever get that or not. Hopefully he clears protocol and can play that last game because it'd be nice to see another preseason game out of him. He's just looked nice so far, man. You remember that play he had in the route where he covered the tight end and there was a wide receiver behind it, and he skied up for that thing and dang near tipped that thing, forcing a very difficult pass that ended up incomplete in the corner of the end zone because of his athleticism and his awareness to realize the ball is not being thrown at his guy, but there is someone behind it and he still might be able to make the play. Just a really impressive individual. And I'm with you. Mark Robinson had a pretty nice game too. Makes you feel a little bit more confident about that room.
Yeah, much more confident. I wouldn't even say little.
Yeah.
At this point, barring any other injuries, knock on wood, this is the most confident I've been in this middle linebacker room, especially with the youth that we have.
Yeah.
I said the same thing last year with, Cole Holcomb and all these guys coming in. And unfortunately, we had 2 injuries very early with Landon Roberts and Cole Holcomb both going down with severe injuries. Cole Holcomb still may not be back this year. We're kind of waiting to see how that goes.
Yeah.
But
we don't know.
I mean, with the addition to Patrick Queen and the play that we know that we can get from Landon Roberts, and then now seeing Peyton Wilson and then Mark Robinson, I'm very excited for this linebacker crew. And then obviously the outside. Normally we have a third outside linebacker on a rotation that like we're okay with. I am ecstatic for Nick Herbig. I told you last year in my way too early predictions that he was going to have 10 sacks on the year. There's a chance he gets them this year. Okay. Like he is flying to the ball.
Yeah. His snap count will be higher for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And low key, groin injuries are real tricky, right? You never know how much it's going to linger, how much it's going to affect somebody. I wouldn't be surprised if Alex Highsmith's snap count is low at the beginning of the season while he's dealing with this groin injury, which means Nick Herbig is going to have a lot of snaps. Also means whoever that 4th guy is might get more snaps than would have previously. And I'll tell you what I'm seeing out of Kieran Johnson. Boy, is he explosive too. Didn't get the stat line this week that he had the previous week with getting after the quarterback and whatnot. But he shows a very explosive first step. Looks more stout against the run than he did last year. My guess is he put some real work in the offseason on getting a little bit bigger and stronger. And it shows. So I put him as an edge right now over Moon, 4th outside linebacker spot. I mean, Welshoff is getting some snaps and getting some high-end snaps too. But let's remember, Welshoff doesn't count for a roster spot. You can keep him on the practice squad, I think, and keep an extra guy by doing so. So I wouldn't expect him to be on the 53. I don't think he's looked good enough for that. But Welshoff looks like a capable backup at least. No reason other than to be excited about these guys, I think.
Yeah. James, you want to talk about the secondary?
We can. I didn't see some big pop out of these guys this week that
Miles
I saw
Killebrew.
last week. Yeah,
Miles
that's the
Killebrew.
lone celebration, right? And Miles Killebrew gets a pick on what was a poorly thrown ball. Was that our boy?
I don't know.
Well, who's got the interception? Who threw that? It'll be
I'll
enough
pull it up
to
right now.
find. We'll
Yep,
switch
it
over to
was Mitch.
Buffalo. Yep. Mitch throws a bad ball. Mark Robinson was in coverage on the play, kind of forced it to be high because it was the only place it could be to try to get that catch. Mitch throws it too high, easy interception for Miles Killebrew. One thing that man definitely has is fantastic hands. So you put him near him, he's definitely catching that ball. So nice job from him. Ryan Watts very highly involved as far as getting a lot of tackles in this game. Also number 42 on defense, McMichael. He had a ton of tackles. There was a streak where he had like 3 or 4 tackles in a row.
Yep.
So somebody with some pretty good tackling ability from what I could see. I want to say he's a corner. Kyler McMichael, 6'2", 210. They had him listed as just a defensive back, but I think he was playing corner. So seemed like a solid tackler and maybe somebody you might want to think about practice squad.
Yeah. Also saw a really, really good breakup out of Thomas Graham Jr. He's 5'10", 196, been in the league for 3 years now, out of Oregon, but enjoyed seeing that good breakup. That happened at a time where I was like getting frustrated with certain things, and I messaged you and I was like, okay, I see this guy.
Yeah.
Like, it was a really nice breakup.
Yeah, and that's somebody that we should not be sleeping on
Nope.
because with Beanie Bishop out, he's been running team nickel corner. So that is somebody who could find their way onto the roster, and if they don't, definitely someone that you will be looking at for the practice squad. So keep your eye out for Thomas Graham Jr. Good call out, Cody.
Yeah. Chris Boswell, we'll switch over to special teams. Unfortunately, had that miss from over 50. He did nail his one field goal from 43. Was the lone star scorer of the game. And then punting, Cameron Johnston performed incredibly well.
Booming him, man. 65-yarder, 61-yarder, did a real job.
I hate to say this because it's really upsetting, but I think the MVP of the first 2 preseason games combined is our punter.
Stop. No, it's Nick Herbig. Stop.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, that's fair. But like, still,
Cameron Johnson's in the top 5 though.
He's in the top 3. Okay, it's really unfortunate.
Peyton Wilson. I'll put Peyton Wilson up there too.
Yeah.
He's been good both games.
So 2 defensive guys and a special teams punter, where we're giving the ball back to them, are our 2 our 3 main players this preseason. Nothing crazy.
Also, we didn't talk about it previously, but I thought Des Fitzpatrick had a game at wide receiver. I was real happy to see that, especially when he's in a roster battle right now. I would say with Quez Watkins for that final spot.
Yep.
I feel like the top 5 are kind of locked up right now. Scotty Miller's looked good, as you indicated. Van's looking good. The top 3 are locks. So I would say, yeah, this is really important. Des, if a game like that together, he might edge out Quez Watkins, who they didn't even let return kicks this week.
Nope,
they had Scotty Miller doing it. That tells you a lot.
Well, so and let's start with this too. There's still the conversation to be had that I don't want to have too much on this episode of the podcast. But there's the Brandon Ayuk situation. If he comes to Pittsburgh, you're knocking that last person off the depth chart completely. And then there's also the conversation that I wouldn't put it past Pittsburgh on being open to having a reunion with Juju. I think there's enough good blood and positivity between Tomlin and him and the front office and him and everything else and the community and him that I think Pittsburgh would be open to bringing him back in. I don't think he would be the number 1, but he would easily probably be number 2, number 3 wide receiver. And I think that would benefit George Pickens. I genuinely think the presence of Juju would help if he's okay with coming at a small enough deal. Pittsburgh does not want to pay him now. And I don't blame them. Get a 1-year prove-it deal, and maybe we can extend you next year if the chemistry works and if everything works out. But if things fall through with Brandon Ayuk and he winds up staying with the 49ers, which sounds like it could be a possibility, with him being upset that Pittsburgh came in under $28 million per year on their contract offer, and that sent him back to the 49ers table to have the discussion with them. Juju is a very valid option for a number 2 or number 3 wide receiver in my books. And I think that they would be almost arrogant to not consider it. So I'm very excited to see that potential reunion happen. I would love to see Brandon Ayuk come. At this point, really, I want to see our wide receiver group be healthy because I want to see Roman Wilson play. I want to see what
Yeah.
we can get out of him. I'm excited to see Calvin Austin, but I haven't seen him enough in a receiving role to really get anything out of him. I see him mostly with kickoff and punt returns and stuff like that.
Yeah. He didn't get targeted enough in this game.
No.
Let's call it what it is.
He didn't get
But
targeted
that's a part of
once.
not having successful drives.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
100%.
if you don't have successful drives, you're not throwing the ball enough to target all the guys on the field.
Yep.
My take on the Juju thing, as much as I love Juju, I don't to because he did say some things to the media after leaving Pittsburgh, indicating how much better of an atmosphere and how much more professional it was at the team he was. Those were some comments that I could have done without, and I doubt the front office will forget that.
That's fair.
That might be tough. I'd take him back. I like him, but I'm not 100% sold that he'd be an upgrade over Van Jefferson right now.
That's fair. That is fair. I think his blocking abilities would be an upgrade.
Yeah.
From
that's
that
very
standpoint.
fair.
So interested to see how this all plays out. Final roster moves obviously coming next week after the next preseason game that we have, which is against the
Detroit Lions.
Yeah, Detroit Lions at Ford Field this Saturday at 1:00. So be on the lookout for that. If you guys have any input on these games that you guys want us to share, message us after the game or during the game. We would love to be in contact with you and discuss how the team is performing and share some thoughts from other Steelers fans out there. So thank you guys so much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. Remember to like and follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell. It's free. Don't cost you a thing. And don't forget the 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. Makes James real, real happy. And until next time, this is your host, James and Cody, signing off.
Peace.